And here we are live. You can see Mr. Rayo sunning himself just oh so beautifully on the on some shoreline. Did you hop on a plane last night to get to go to some tropical paradise?
I guess it's because we're going to be talking about tropical weather that I figured, well, we might as well have a perfect backdrop for this. So here you are,
All
or here
right.
we are.
And speaking of tropical weather, of course, everything is front and center with respects to Marco and Laura. Do you see them here on the visible satellite loop this morning? It's 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday morning edition of the Joe and Joe Weather Show, where it's all about the tropics, and it's all going to also be about the threat for severe weather in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states on Tuesday. So we're going to do the tropics first, and then we'll segue over into the other stuff. Joe, two hurricanes making landfall in the Gulf along the Gulf Coast in within 48 hours of each other. That still looks to be the plan. And I'm thinking, just looking at Laura and everything else with respect to the upper air, that Laura has a chance to become the season's first major before landfall if once it emerges into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I think so too, Joe. The waters of the Gulf, very, very warm. And there really doesn't appear to be anything that's going to knock Laura down in terms of any kind of significant upper level shear. With all due respect to Marco will march into the Gulf Coast. Probably will continue on mostly a northwestward trajectory, but probably just dry out, so to speak, over a span of time. But Laura certainly looks like it has more going for it in the coming days ahead. And yeah, I would agree. This would not be surprising if Laura ended up being, let's say, a Cat 3 or maybe even higher. Dare I say, even higher than that.
Well, I would, yeah, I don't know if I would push that upper end of the envelope. I want to see what it looks like, what happens once it emerges, how much damage to the core of the storm is occurring with it moving over all of Hispaniola and now moving over Cuba. You look at the satellite, though; it's kind of maintained a very solid signature all the way across. So my guess is at this point that perhaps the core is in pretty solid shape. And yes, the upper trough in the western Gulf of Mexico that's creating strong upper air winds throughout much of the Gulf is going to be retrograding westward back into Texas and into the southwest. Once Laura gets into the Gulf, those strong upper air winds are going to be all gone. And Marco also is a very small storm. I just want to make this point with Marco, even if it becomes a minimal hurricane, and it probably will, it's almost there based on the recon this morning. It's a small system. The gales only go out about 50 or 60 miles to the northeast and a little bit less than that to the northwest. They actually go out 100 miles out to the southwest, which is interestingly enough because of the fact that you have this deep upper trough and strong south-southwest winds involved in the mix. So this is not something that is it's going to impact a small area of coastline. And I agree with you in that once it's inland, it's likely to probably weaken relatively quickly. So while it's going to have impact, I'm emphasizing the fact that the impact is going to be over a relatively small area of geography.
Which was good because if you were to have a hard hitting storm affecting a broad area and then follow it up within 48 hours with an even stronger weather system, that's not just, a lot of people forget, Joe, that when we had Gloria in 1985, 2 days before the tri-state area encountered Gloria, we actually had a tropical storm pass by. It was rather small and rather fast moving and didn't really have all that much to say. But that was Tropical Storm Henri. So we had an Henri, we had some rain, we had some gusty winds with that. And then the main event was 2 days later with Gloria. And I suppose that if you live around the New Orleans area, Marco will be the opening shot, and then Laura will come along as the main event a couple of days later, and that'll be the storm that'll make all the difference as to adverse conditions in and around the Gulf Coast next week.
All right, so let's get started with the with these systems. There's a number of watches and warnings that are up, and uh, they cover the Louisiana coast for Marco, where we have hurricane warnings up for southeastern Louisiana. This includes the city of New Orleans. The one thing to watch here is the angle of approach because it is coming in from the southeast. So where the landfall takes place will be very important. But again, it is a small system, so you're kind of shooting at a very small target here. We've got watches extended a little bit further to the west into coastal Louisiana, probably as a precaution in case we take a little bit of a hook to the left. And tropical storm warnings up for the Mississippi and Alabama Gulf Coast. We have tropical storm watches that are up further east to the Alabama-Florida state line. There hasn't really been too much change in this, and in terms of where the watches and warnings are. And we're also seeing tropical storm watches up for the Florida Keys, along with the coastal waters tropical storm watch. And this is for Laura as it moves across Cuba. Laura having a bit of a bigger wind field, particularly on the north side, Joe. One of the things that's happening here and that's different from Marco is interacting with an upper trough. Laura, on the other hand, is interacting with the very strong upper ridge to the north, and this is creating some rather strong winds. Most of those strong winds are offshore, but there are some strong winds occurring because of the tight gradient with that high, and that's a huge difference between the two.
Right, and that is going to be the key as to why Marco is going to weaken, especially when it makes landfall, as opposed to Laura. Laura, as we just mentioned, is probably going to become noticeably stronger. It's going to be certainly a more robust tropical cyclone, and it's going to have a say in weather well after it makes landfall. Joe, as we will certainly get to in a few moments, its track taking it up into the Midwest, and maybe eventually having some say, not a direct influence, but I mean some say in our weather as we close out the upcoming week on Friday.
Right, and it'll be in the form of ahead of another cold front. I don't think you would notice. I'm thinking you're probably not going to notice the difference too much with regards to what would have happened in the cold front with or without the Laura. Satellite loop of Marco is up. It still has this sort of north-south stretch to it, and again, this is the upper trough in the Gulf of Mexico. Notice that there isn't a cloud, hardly a cloud anywhere in the central and western Gulf, and this is again the trough at work and the strong south-southwest, the strong southerly flow pushing up those clouds to the northeast. Now the shear is not strong enough to rip the core of this apart, and in fact, it seems to be holding its own in terms of strength. But that bright white ball you see is a small area. There isn't a lot going on the west side of this. I think this is going to be one of these systems when they come into the coast. You're not going to see too much happening west of the center. And I can tell you from personal experience, Joe, having a hurricane Elena in 1985 coming in from the east into New Orleans, which is the worst way you could have a hurricane come in. But the storm was so small that it literally on the west side, the strongest wind that I mean, there were some gusts with some bands that came in, and the storm was while it was almost a Category 3 at one point, it was in a weakening phase as it approached, and the strongest wind gust I lived literally about 10 miles from where the eye passed, could not get a wind gust higher than 15-20 knots.
Wow.
And that's how small it was, and its impact was virtually minimal. So I'm not trying to say that the same thing's going to happen to Marco, but I just want to just pointing out that the size of these are not. Every hurricane is different in terms of structure and in terms of of impacts. We have a lot of other things in the atmosphere that create systems that are distorted in one direction or another. They make them large, they make them small, they make the gale areas big, they make the gale areas small. In this instance, we're talking about a system that the wind field is going to be small. Rain, I think, will probably be the bigger issue in the area that the core of this moves over. And the other thing to worry about because of the angle of approach is that area in Southeast Louisiana and along the Mississippi, Alabama Gulf Coast, because the Gulf water is being pushed into that very narrow zone. So that is going to probably create some tidal flooding concerns. But Joe, at the moment on the satellite, the signature to me doesn't look any different than it did yesterday, and I don't think we're going to see this change very much going forward.
Now, the thing that concerns me, and I'm looking at the latest discussion, technical discussion from the National Hurricane Center, is that this 72-hour position, 26.8 and 91.4, still has it over the Gulf of Mexico, and the peak winds 90 miles per hour. Then, when we move to 24 hours later, at 96 hours, they move it inland. It's 30.9 north, 94.0 west, and yet the 24 hours later, it has a peak wind of 100 miles per hour.
Hold on. Wait a second. Let me. That doesn't sound right. It's inland and it's got a peak wind of 100. That can't be.
Well, Joe, I'm just saying right now at 96 hours,
and this is for Marco
miles per hour, and they do say inland.
Right, but this is for Marco or Laura.
This is for Laura.
Okay, you're talking Laura. Okay, yeah, let's be clear. We're still talking Marco.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the information here, and that immediately took precedence when I saw that. I said, but what I was trying to get across with Laura is that if it's 90 miles an hour when it's still well offshore and 100 miles an hour when it moves well inland, you got to believe that what they're thinking of at the National Hurricane Center is a dramatic increase in the wind to just
somewhere in between that time frame. In fact, they do say in their discussion for Laura, by the way, that even though they only take it to 85 knots in that one period, they do say that there's a fair chance that it's going to be stronger than that when it makes landfall because there's some time in between. So yeah, again, going back to the argument that this could certainly get to a strong category 2, and maybe there's time for it to, there's going to be time for it to even make a category 3 status as long as the core remains intact. But Marco's not going to do that.
No, Marco is as you just pointed out a few moments ago, Joe. We have 2 tropical cyclones, and they're facing two different things. Laura is going to be interacting with a high pressure ridge, which certainly is not going to slow it down in terms of potential intensification. But Marco, as you just pointed out a little while ago, is facing an upper level trough. It's going to be facing the potential of getting ripped a little bit, figuratively, and literally, I guess, too, before making landfall. And that's why Marco does not look like it's going to become quite the storm that Laura looks like it's going to be. But 75 mile per hour, it's only 5 miles per hour away from that now.
Right.
And it looks like it's going to be a Cat 1 when it makes landfall, and that again will be followed by Laura. And Laura looks like a more formidable storm. In fact, I keep thinking about Katrina. I think about that Saturday night when I went to sleep. I looked at it; it was like a Cat 2. I said, okay, well, it's going to come in either as a Cat 2 or a Cat 3. Wake up the next morning, the damn thing was like verging on Category 5.
Yeah.
I said, what happened? What the hell happened in just a few hours? And that scenario could very well, I'm not going to say it is going to happen, but don't be surprised that scenario happens with Laura again, where it just suddenly intensifies, off the wall in just a very short interval of time, because we're at that same time of the year now, late August, and we're in the same area of the world, the Gulf of Mexico adjacent to New Orleans. why couldn't it happen again? It might very well.
Again, what does the core look like when it moves out is going to be key. I have the model track guidance. I saved the one from overnight just so that everybody could see the comparisons of what's happening. And we talked yesterday on the show that this was one of those instances. Usually, the model track guidance tightens up as you get closer, and with the systems that we've dealt with this year, it's been kind of remarkable that in those particular systems how tight the envelope was with the model track guidance with the prior storms. Isaias was one. It was fairly well behaved inside a very tight range, and the models handled it fairly well. In this instance, though, as we go out in time, we have started seeing the spread get wider and fairly wide. And this was from overnight with Marco, some as far left as Houston and some as far east as Mobile, with the core of them concentrated over southeastern Louisiana, which made the most sense. And this was the overnight guidance. The new 12Z has tightened up a little bit. It's pulled in the southernmost outlier to about from Houston to just east of Houston and Galveston, and the easternmost outlier is now at Biloxi, so in Mississippi. So you've got again the tightening of the model tracks into southeastern Louisiana, which I think really does make the most sense through all of this. And the other thing of note is going to be the intensity guidance, which has been fairly consistent from overnight until now. You have most of the models maintain this as a strong tropical storm or a minimal hurricane. Landfall is going to be a little over 24 hours from now, so the clock is starting to tick in terms of how strong this is going to get. But I think a minimal hurricane makes sense. And then, of course, you see this rapid decrease once inland. After it goes inland, say tomorrow afternoon sometime, a mid to late after, somewhere in the afternoon. I'm going to say middle afternoon, and then you notice the intensities all drop pretty quickly. So Marco seems to the situation with Marco is becoming relatively clear in terms of where the impacts are going to be, and the question, we'll see what the plane finds on its next round. And here's the Hurricane Center's earlier forecast from the morning package from 5 a.m. With the system becoming a minimal hurricane later today, which they still have. The red areas where the hurricane warnings are up for Southeast Louisiana, including New Orleans. And then as it approaches the coast, the Hurricane Center's got it making a bit of a left-handed hook there, crossing southern Louisiana and going into southeast Texas. That's the old forecast. The new forecast, I imagine, is a little bit of an adjustment here, maybe a little bit further to the, just a slight shift to the northeast in the latter portion of the forecast period, having it a tropical storm once it gets on shore. So it goes for, if it's a minimal hurricane, the winds are going to drop off relatively quickly and then weakens to a depression by the time we get to Tuesday evening. But the 7 p.m. position is right on the coast. So mid to late afternoon landfall for Marco. Now we can move on to Laura.
Yes, Laura.
And I have to say, Joe, one of the things that strikes me, and this is again one of the reasons why I'm thinking along the same lines that you are with respect to where this is going as far as strength is concerned. The satellite signature, when you think about the fact that the core moved over the entire island of Hispaniola, it's now, as of 11/18, and based on the Hurricane Center's discussion and surface plots, the actual low center has now emerged off the west coast of Haiti and about to take its adventure over the entire island of Cuba. But it's really, the signature on this, on the satellite, is actually quite solid, considering the fact that it had to deal with those mountains. And rain has been the big story in the Dominican Republic because the mountains are just enhancing all of the convection, and you're seeing some pretty fairly impressive blowups of thunderstorms as this thing continues on its track to the west northwest. But I'm impressed with the way it looks on the satellite.
Yeah, so am I, because I could remember distinctly, 1979, David went right over Hispaniola and got pretty well torn up. It had to put itself back together before making landfall a few days later in the U.S. So I always, based upon that benchmark, you always figure that any kind of tropical system that interacts with Hispaniola is going to do a pretty good job of shredding up a tropical system. But the fact is that Laura's holding her own based upon what we're seeing on that satellite loop. And so that's it. And the other thing, Joe, on the 6Z GFS, just before making landfall, according to the GFS now, Laura has a central pressure of 954 millibars. That's 28.17 inches of mercury, and that puts it right on the cusp between a strong category 2 and becoming a category 3. And again, I think that there may be some underplaying of the strength of Laura when she makes landfall.
Well,
I'm
The European model also supports a major there. The European, I believe, got it down into the nine, almost the nine, into the 940s
Yeah,
before
yeah,
landfall.
yeah. It's
So the
no question that
globals are
there's
there.
landfall. Yeah,
But again, I'm pretty, you know, pretty impressed with the way this thing has behaved. And one difference, by the way, between with David back in '79 versus this is that David came in as a major when it made its landfall, and it had a really solid core. And a lot of times when hurricanes have that really super solid core and they get torn apart by the mountains, uh, it's a little dicey as to whether they recover when they move out. They never seem to get back to where they were. There are some exceptions to that, including a few in the relatively recent history of storms that have undergone this sort of experience and wound up being stronger ultimately on the other side. But uh, in this case, you have a system that was, it was a tropical storm, but it really didn't have an opportunity to become a hurricane ahead of it. So perhaps the broader the circulation with the system being a bit broader is keeps most of it over the water, even though the center might be over land. The Most of the circulation is over open waters, the north side on the Atlantic, the south side on the Caribbean, and now once it gets past the eastern half of Cuba, which is mountainous, the western part of Cuba is flatter. So the wait is for this to move out into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico to see what it does, and that's going to come later tomorrow.
actually, I mentioned in 1979 David, but coming close on the heels of David was Frederick. Frederick
Frodrick.
Frederick passed right over Hispaniola as well, and yet it took a path which probably is a lot closer to what Laura is going to take over over eastern Cuba, then eventually skirting the south coast of Cuba, going out across western Cuba, and then turning up into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's a bit closer to what we saw or what we are
Yeah,
seeing with Laura as opposed to
Frederick's a better match because Frederick actually weakened quite a bit as it transversed those islands. But once it got into the Gulf, it blew up into a Category 3.
right.
And there were islands south of Alabama that Dauphin Island that comes to mind that no longer exists because of Hurricane Frederick. Frederick was an absolute powerhouse once it got into the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah, I think that's probably that's a better that might work. That might make a better fit here. With what's
Right.
happening. So here's a model track guidance with Laura from overnight. The spread actually is not as wide as it was with Marco. The eastern, well, I'm going to throw out the one outlier that takes it up off the west coast of Florida. That's just so far out there that I'm going to just not even consider that uh, to my own at my own peril. But the westernmost is New Orleans. The easternmost is actually about halfway between Galveston, and Port Arthur. And everything else is kind of clustered in between in southeasternmost Texas and in western Louisiana, west of New Orleans. And that was the old model guidance overnight. The latest one has actually, you still got the one outlier, the one super outlier that's now on the Florida Panhandle, so it's actually come westward. But if you look at the ones that are, you got a whole bunch of them now that are tightly clustered in right from the Texas Louisiana state line into Southwest Louisiana. So there's a fairer degree of confidence here. And when you add the global models, the GFS is probably right in line with where the hurricane tracking models are, except whereas the European is on the is south. Last night's European is south of the southern end of this envelope. So southeasternmost Texas, southwestern Louisiana, Joe, to me looks like the target zone here. And when you look at the track from off Cuba, that's maximum coverage in terms of miles about how much time it's going to be have over the water coming in at that angle moving northwestward.
Yeah, and unfortunately for New Orleans, Joe, the worst place that you possibly want to be is on the right side of the path of or a track of a hurricane or a tropical system. And it looks like once again, although hopefully nothing like what they saw with Katrina, but it looks like once again New Orleans is going to get battered for at least a few hours by some very strong to severe winds from Laura.
Well, depending, how tight, we'll have to see how tight it gets. I'll see how far the gales go out, but certainly rain will probably be in the cards with this one.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. All the things that they did in the aftermath of Katrina, to protect against the next time, quote unquote, the next time. Well, we may be looking in the next few days at the next time for that city.
All right, the hurricane intensity guidance from overnight was most of the models make the Laura a hurricane, and actually a fair number, category 2, and when we had 2 that took it to category 3. The new guidance, Joe, has even more. Almost all of them make it a category 1. And you have a few of them that make it a 2, but you've got one that makes it a 3 and one that makes it a 4. So the trend here continues to be where the models are getting onto the idea that we're going to have this thing strengthened considerably once it moves offshore. And here's the old Hurricane Center forecast. It's actually been fairly consistent for the most part. The new one is about the same, maybe a shade to the left on the new one. And you see where we have the tropical storm warnings up over Cuba, the North Shore of the Dominican Republic, the tropical storm watches for the southern Bahamas and the Florida Keys. The landfall would be sometime Wednesday night in the way the Hurricane Center has it, coming in pretty much right on the Louisiana Texas state line, is
Right.
how they've drawn it. So the European would argue that that's too far to the right. The GFS is kind of in line with this. The models are going to do whatever they're going to do now, so we'll take a break and see what they show us later this afternoon, so we can keep fine tuning this. And again, at 11 a.m., Laura's at 19.2, 73.2. Top winds are 50 miles an hour, and again, that reflects what's going on out in the open waters. West northwest at 21, so it's chugging right along here. If it were moving at a 5 or 10 mile an hour pace, I think you would see this probably not look as strong on the satellite as opposed to what you're seeing today.
And I'm just looking also at the future. I'm on my page here on my monitor. I'm just looking at the 500 millibar height anomaly, and looking at what happens after it makes landfall. And the whole thing kind of flattens out, and as you pointed out, Joe, will merge with a cold front. And by the time we get to what's the date I'm looking at here, 0Z Sunday. By the time we get to Saturday night, Sunday morning next week, the flow is really going to turn into that northwesterly direction. And thanks actually to in part to Laura, her interaction with the front, that upper level wind flow is really going to pull in some nice, clean, crisp, cool Canadian air into our area for next week. Not to say that we're not going to see something like that Tuesday night into Wednesday with our severe weather threat, but a prolonged period of refreshing air coming our way in the aftermath of the passage of the remnants of Laura through our area the end of next week and next weekend.
All right, so I've got the upper air up here, so we can take a look at the conditions that are existing that exist right now in the Gulf of Mexico and the difference between the two storms, because this is really the bottom line as far as why Marco is going to do what it's going to do, and what Laura is going to do what it's going to do. So let me point out the features on this map. So this is kind of a combination of two maps. You've got the surface lows that you see there represent the two tropical storms. The winds that are indicated in the colors of yellow and green and orange and blue and white, the wind speeds are actually showing the layer between uh, say 5,000 feet and 30,000 feet. And what we're looking for here is wind shear or winds increasing with height. So where you have Marco indicated right there, Marco is sitting on the edge of this strong belt of southwest winds in the upper atmosphere, and you see they're actually quite strong, running up to 40 or 40 knots or higher. That's a lot, and that is because to the northwest, let me clean that up. Right here is this very deep trough. Now we're looking at the layer at way up at about 30,000 feet here. There is a very, very deep trough that is covering that entire, almost all of the Gulf of Mexico. The area of light wind shear is down actually in the southwestern Gulf, south of where Marco is. So Marco's having to deal with these strong south-southwest winds because of this deep trough. And meanwhile, Laura is in a totally different place. Laura, over the islands, is in an area, the low actually sits under an upper high and relatively light upper air wind. So it's able to maintain itself. Plus, there's the ridge to the north that covers the Atlantic from east to west, and you've got this really tight pressure gradient. But watch what happens as we go through Sunday and Monday. Marco is moving northwestward towards southeastern Louisiana, but look a little bit to the west of that, where you see the upper trough. That upper trough is retrograding or moving westward rather than trough. The troughs are usually used to seeing these troughs at higher levels of the atmosphere moving from east to west, from west to east. This one is actually retrograding westward. So the whole area of strong winds in the Gulf of Mexico actually pulls up into Texas and then moves inland. Laura now emerges out into the Gulf, and what happens? Well, this whole area here that you see in the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico is now all light upper air winds. The strong south-southwest winds in the upper atmosphere have now moved into central Texas, and that area continues to shift westward. And this is creating a much more favorable environment for this system to strengthen. And those upper air winds just continue to hold back in through Texas. And then, of course, at this point, as we get to Wednesday and Thursday, you've got Laura coming inland. So this is what's happening, folks, in the upper atmosphere as to why Marco is doing what it's doing in terms of intensity, and why Laura will be doing what it will do once it gets out into the open waters of the Gulf.
It's kind of like comparing two people getting on a plane, and one ends up in first class and the other ends up in coach.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, one is impacting the other because Marco obviously reacting to the trough that's there now. But it is interesting how in just 48, in literally 36 to 48 hours, how much the upper air environment changes from one storm to the other.
Absolutely, and that's going to be the main. Unfortunately for poor Marco, Marco is going to have to encounter and deal with the with those gusty southwesterly shearing winds. And as you pointed out, Joe, that whole area of southwesterly shear retrogrades or ends up going backwards back to the west. And as a result, here comes Laura, and Laura says, "Oh, well, thank you very much," and into a very favorable environment for getting stronger and potentially posing a greater threat to the Gulf Coast 48 hours later.
All right, so now I'm going to let the GFS hopefully load itself up from the overnight run for a look at the next situation regarding our severe weather and the longer term outlook. So while it's doing that, I do have some of the aircraft, the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft stuff, because Marco has a plane in there right now, and this is all available to everyone on tropicaltidbits.com. Although for some reason that graphic doesn't seem to want to load all the way, so we'll move on. There it is. So this is the flight that is happening right now, plotted graphically. The last frame, the last update on this one was at 10:41 Eastern time, so it was about an hour ago. But you see the track here with the center points that the plane found. The pressure first pass was 991. The last pass was 995. You've got these millibars. You've got the wind barbs. You've got a few of the purple wind barbs, which represent 64 to 83 knots to the northeast of the center. So, the wind field north and east of the center is much more impressive than the wind field southwest and south. Not a whole lot happening, and this is again because of the structure that's going on in the upper atmosphere. And here's how it looks graphically. I find these, Joe, really useful from Tropical Tidbits to have these charts with respect to winds. The one on the upper left is mean sea level pressure and flight level wind. The blue is the flight level. The red is the mean sea level pressures. And you can see over time on the bottom from the first two passes where the pressure is measured down somewhere under 995, 994-ish, and you've got two rounds of peak winds to about 65 knots at flight level. On the upper right, you see the rain rates and the surface wind in blue, and you do have some peak winds. These are 10-meter winds. One at looks like at about 60 knots, and one peak stretch there toward the end reported not that many minutes ago, about 20 or so minutes ago, with winds between 65 and 75. So there are
Right.
some strong winds there on the northeast side. So this is all on Tropical Tidbits, by the way, folks. If you ever want to look at this stuff on your own. And with respect to Laura, we this is from earlier today. Let's see if this is the last one because I think they may be okay. So they just sort of updated this. Some winds up at around 50 knots, which matches what they have on the advisory, and the mean sea level pressure is missing because that's probably when the center was somewhere over land and they couldn't get to. So we have only about a limited amount of data with regards to that. So I think we pretty much covered it all with regards to the tropical systems, Joe. So let's move on to the severe weather risk for Tuesday, which is setting up for the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states. And the Storm Prediction Center, Mr. Rayo, is pretty much has the same thing it had on its day 4 outlook. And you and I both know that when they do it in that day 4 to 8 time frame and they show up, an area of severe weather shows up, they're kind of telling you to pay attention. Well, we've got slight risk from northern Virginia, from eastern Ohio, central, northern West Virginia, northern Virginia, all the way up to Maine. This is probably one of the larger outbreak forecasts that we've had in the Northeast this summer.
Correct. And the reason, as we mentioned yesterday, is that the front that's going to generate all of this is going to be coming in from the north and northwest. And I really don't see very much, even on Long Island or Cape Cod or the islands or down East Maine, for any kind of marine activity to knock the strength of these storms down. They're going to be coming in again from the north and northwest, and this sometimes results in some of our more severe cases for thunderstorm activity. That is a big area, Joe. Do they have? Can you see on your? They usually like say how many millions of people are in
Oh, okay.
specific
Yeah.
zone or whatever.
And by the way, in case I didn't say it before, this is for Tuesday, okay? It's not for today and it's not for tomorrow. It's for
So they
Tuesday.
don't give they don't give that number out for extended.
Right. So the population, well, they kind of outlined the population of the major cities. I don't see, do they give a number here? Uh, so it looks like the area population is for 15% risk is 68,932,609. Oops, somebody just gave birth to a baby girl. It's 610. Here come twins, 612.
I mean, look at that. That's the megalopolis, the Northeast corridor, and all of it from Washington and Baltimore through Philly, New York, on up to Boston is in this zone of slight risk of severe. And who's to say? Maybe when we get to tomorrow, or maybe on the actual day Tuesday, part of that slight may actually have a little bit of moderate in it, or
Or
maybe
enhanced
moderate,
anyway. You don't see moderate too often up here, but enhanced I certainly
enhanced, or whatever.
could
I
see.
wish they'd go back. I don't know about you, Joe. I wish they would just go back to slight, moderate, and high, because that was a lot easier for me to
I
understand.
know now it's marginal, slight, enhanced. Maybe they should add into that to make it slightly moderate, moderately moderate, strongly moderate, slightly high
Listen,
risk.
I was at the National Weather Association conference when the folks from SPC were there giving a presentation about how and why they changed everything, and they went for like a whole hour. I think after the hour was up, I think a lot of people left that auditorium still saying it really was a lot easier with slight, moderate, and high as opposed to the way it is now. But that's
Yeah,
that's the way of the world today.
it is. All right, so here's the upper air as far as why we're having to deal with this, and of course we've got this steamy pattern that we went into yesterday, and it continues today, and will continue tomorrow and Tuesday. Upper 80s and low 90s, high humidity, scattered thunderstorms running around in the late afternoon and evening. But we do continue to see this rather busy jet stream that lies along the Canadian border. Here's your upper high in the southwest. Here's that narrow east-west ridge in the Atlantic. That's the driver with respect to Laura and of course Marco moving around the periphery of that ridge. So as we roll through time, what's happening is there's a short wave that drops down from Lake Winnipeg, swings eastward across Hudson's Bay, and strengthens rather considerably on Tuesday over New England and in eastern Canada. Nice looking upper low that drops down there. So that's going to bring a strong cold front through. And also, you'll notice, folks, the rather strong northwest flow, as Joe mentioned earlier, in the upper atmosphere for the middle part of next week. That should bring a humidity break for a couple of days. And right here, of course, is the upper air reflection of Laura moving inland. That trough lifts out. Laura gets pulled northward by another short wave that comes around and heads well west of the Appalachians. But this is going to bring an even stronger trough through here next weekend and set us up for some nice dry weather for the last days of August and the first days of September. That trough pulls out. We get into a bit of a ridge, and then another stronger trough swings in through southern Canada and swings across the northeast. So the pattern is busy, Joe. The pattern suggests certainly that we're going to get cold fronts on a regular basis. The pattern also suggests that tropical systems are going to have a really tough time trying to move up the East Coast if there's a northwest flow running from Newfoundland all the way down into North Carolina. You can't bring storms up the East Coast when you've got a northwest flow in the eastern part of the United States. So that at least that's another big plus with this, is that we've got some temporary protection with regards to anything else that forms in the tropics and wants to take aim for the U.S.
Well, I agree to a certain extent about that, Joe. Yeah, we're not going to have to worry about um, the two tropical systems to any great degree. We may get some um, offshoot effects from Laura in terms of showers and gusty winds here on Friday as it links up with that next cold front and hopefully brings in some nice weather for the weekend. But then on the other hand, and I brought this up yesterday, while the folks down in the Gulf states Tuesday and Wednesday are going to have their hands full with two tropical impacts from two tropical systems, we here in the Northeast are going to have to deal with that threat of thunderstorm activity. I'm looking at the discussion from the Storm Prediction Center, and they are pointing out here in the Northeast that they say still with very strong flow aloft promoting rapid storm motions. Risk for damaging winds will exist with any sustained convection. And if more destabilization than currently expected occurs ahead of that cold front, particularly if frontal progression is slower in future model runs, and what they're saying, folks, is that if the front is slower, that means that when the front arrives here, perhaps late afternoon and evening, that would make for maximum diurnal heating and make for an even greater risk. If that be the case, they said, even greater severe weather probability would be likely across this area. In other words, instead of just slight, they may very well, Joe, bump us up to enhanced. And so we are going to have our hands full Tuesday and Tuesday night, perhaps, while the folks down in the Gulf states are groping with their problems with the tropical system. So Tuesday looks like to be a very, very active and interesting day here in the
in our area.
Northeast and down in the Gulf.
The GFS surface, Joe. Whenever you see cold fronts that have those the V-shaped isobar, that always kind of tells you to exercise caution. It indicates the sharpness of the front to have the wind shift from one direction to say almost 180 degrees in another direction or 90 degrees in another direction. This is a pretty sharp cold front that's coming down.
Yes, no question about that. We saw that. I think you and I, we both saw this coming from several days ago, and taking note of the fact that with the upper level winds behind it, coming out of a nice northwest trajectory, suggesting that we were going to get some nice dry air in here. But of course, dry air and muggy, humid air, as we are in now and will be for tomorrow into Tuesday, simply do not mix, and that again would set the stage for possible severe weather here for later Tuesday and Tuesday night. And we only have it for about a day or so, and then things
Right.
start.
Then here comes then it gets humid again.
Yeah, yeah.
And then of course you've got the remnant low of Laura moving across Ohio and Pennsylvania and bringing some at least on the 6Z run anyway. It was a little much further north on the 0Z, but you've got this threat for showers and rain from say later Friday into Saturday, and then then after that goes by, you do have what looks like a really nice looking high with some nice dry air that comes in for a week from today and maybe lasting for a day or so into the subsequent week that follows. We can only hope and pray.
And I said bank on this, and absolutely bank on this, is the fact that um, if we do get some active severe weather here on Tuesday, late Tuesday or Tuesday night, a lot of people on Wednesday are going to say that, and I know nobody on this board, we have over 130 people watching now. No one, of course, will say it here, but elsewhere they'll say on Wednesday, well, was this caused by one of the two hurricanes or whatever?
Right.
And when we get to Friday, I guarantee you this, that with Friday, we're going to get gusty winds and some potential showery and maybe even heavy rains, and you will see every single broadcast outlet in this area, at least television outlets, saying the following: heavy rains, gusty winds, the remnants of what was once powerful Hurricane Laura headed this way. What does that mean for us? And again, they'll use that as a way to grab you and keep you to watch their particular channel. It's just absolutely amazing the way it wasn't like this when you and I got started, Joe, like 40 plus years ago. And then suddenly somebody discovered that, hey, weather can be really an active and important part of an important facet of the newscast. And we can actually draw more people in if we play up the potential severity.
Right, and I also would like to point out that the old saying is because be careful what you wish for because you may get it, and the history throughout as we went through the 80s and 90s as we spent time trying to convince bosses, particularly in the New York market. That was less the case away from New York, but in the New York market, to give weather more time, and they did. And now, of course, when you look at everything that you have to do, I only can think of the line from Duck Soup where somebody goes up to Groucho Marx and says, somebody goes up to Groucho Marx and says, "Your Excellency, the workers are demanding shorter hours." And he responds by saying, "All right, well, we'll start by cutting their lunch hour down to 20 minutes."
Yeah.
And that's what's we wound up getting our workloads quintupled, and our and watched salaries get cut uh, by 50 or 60 or 70 or 80% in some cases. So yeah, I don't know. It's the world. It's the way the world is.
we would we would we would back in the day, this is back in maybe the late 70s or 80s, we would be trying to tell the management, hey, we really need more time because there's an important weather situation, there's a potential severe weather outbreak coming, a cold front coming, or we have to talk about the hurricanes. And instead, you're right, they would find a reason to cut you as opposed to expand the weather. And what would they do on some of those newscasts, Joe? Like, I'm Milton Lewis, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. If
Right.
you're looking for something to do in Fun City, there's no better place to look than East 33rd Street. I
Right.
mean, you'd have stories like that. Meanwhile, you're pulling your hair out because you want desperately to go on and tell people that, hey, tomorrow we may have some active thunderstorms that may drop some heavy rain, pull down some power lines or whatever, but they never saw it. And now it's just the opposite. Now, they lead off with weather. They'll spend 10 minutes on weather. They'll tease you before the newscast by saying, what does this mean for us? We've got team coverage. It's changed so much over the span of, we've gone from one extreme, and you've seen it too. We've gone from one extreme to the other.
Let me say now that we're back full screen here, Mr. Rayo. Let me just say a big thank yous this morning to Steve Lapointe, Scott Briller, Brandon Doherty, Anthony Orr, and Johnny Quest, all hitting super chat on this Sunday, and Joe and I very much appreciate it. Reaver is asking me, am I participating in the Bluefish tournament on Long Island next weekend? Reaver, I've been so wrapped up in everything that's been going on weather-wise, I didn't even realize there was a Bluefish tournament next weekend on the island. I don't know. I got to see what my schedule is like. I got to talk to all my fishing husbands out there to see what they're doing before I can make a decision on that.
My
So
son, I was in the middle of doing an important, I was doing an article for space.com, and my son wanted me to go fishing with him. He said, I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I just didn't have the time, and that got him royally PO'd since he just got me for my birthday a new fishing rod. And I said, well, maybe at the end of the month. I don't know if you believe in these things, Joe, but there are, in almanacs or whatever, they actually have calendars to tell you the best time of the month for fishing. And supposedly next weekend is an excellent time, one of the best times this month to go fishing. I think maybe it has something to do with the phase of the moon.
no, well, I'll tell you something. Interestingly enough, you should say that because I actually was having this conversation with my buddy Phil, who I fish with, and I've also mentioned the fact that I spend Saturday into Sunday morning binge watching David Attenborough on BBC, uh, where they do the Planet Earth series, and it's all this this wonderful nature stuff, and the show is just so terrifically produced, and the music in the background. It's very relaxing to watch. So I have that on in the background as I'm doing things, and sometimes I'll sit and I'll watch. And I particularly have enjoyed when they focused on life in the oceans, and it is amazing how much the moon cycle, the phases of the moon impact fish behavior, fish breeding. There are certain squid, for example, in the Pacific Ocean, wait for the day of the full moon in November is the day when the females come out to meet the males and dance this sort of ballet together as they choose their mates to lay millions of eggs. So there is a lot. There is definitely there's a huge connection between how fish behave. The full moons and the tides signal certain behaviors regarding feeding, regarding breeding, and so on. So there is a lot to that, believe it or not. And there's another thing about this area here that works quite well as far as the wind direction is concerned. When the wind is from the east, you catch the least. When the
Really?
wind is from the west, fishing is best.
Well, if there's anything to this discussion, with the moon approaching full, I think, next weekend, and with the fact that we're calling for a northwesterly wind and drier air, yeah, it might be a great time to go fishing. I still remember as a young boy, though, fishing near the Atlantic Beach Bridge. You'd have entertainment while fishing. If you weren't catching much, and we did a lot of snapper fishing in Reynolds Channel, and that's where the Atlantic Beach Bridge is, right over Reynolds Channel. The entertainment, of course, being that when a sailboat came on by, they'd have to raise the bridge, and sometimes you'd get one of these giant oil tankers, like the Paragon oil tankers, would come by, and then the thing I always noticed about the Atlantic Beach Bridge is when a sailboat came to open the bridge would only go up about like that. But when
Right.
the oil tanker came, they'd open up full way, and it took an awful long time for the tanker to steam on by. But again, entertainment while you're waiting for that pole to snap with a snapper.
Let me just say a big thank you to Kenny Salerno for hitting super chat as well today. And Kenny says, "Why do people give this show a thumbs down? You're getting real weather." I don't know if they're are they giving us the talent a thumbs down, or are they giving the weather that we're forecasting a thumbs down? I have no idea. There are some people that are reflexively negative. So I don't really I don't put too much emphasis
I'll give a thumbs up again.
on the
I'll give a
thumbs
thumbs up
down or
again
thumbs
to
up.
I'll give a thumbs up again to Steve LaPont, Scott Briller, and as we go down the line here, Brendan Doherty and Anthony Orr and Johnny Quest and who else? There was one other person, Kenny Salerno, who says, why are they giving us thumbs down? I don't know if they're giving us the thumbs down, as Joe, as you just mentioned, giving the weather a thumbs down, but
But
all
if they're
those.
giving us the thumbs down, I consider that a compliment. Okay. Listen, you don't honest the way I look at things. And I think there's a lot of truth into this. The folks that um, will complain about somebody, whatever they post on social media, whatever it happens to be, and to me, it's you know what, you don't need to. If you don't like it, just move on. It's not as if you telling me that you disagree with my opinion really matters too much. I love the fact that I had somebody actually complain to me that I posted too much I posted too much weather on my weather page.
Excuse me?
I mean, think about the logic of that. Or you shouldn't. I've had people tell me this. They don't. This was. They don't do it now because social media has been so much of a part of our lives. When it was first, it was the first becoming a part of our lives. Um, People were expressing their never to be humble opinions, and some of those never to be humble opinions were pretty silly. I just want to address one thing that someone just asked about. I just lost it on the chat, so I forgot who it was. Asking about why Sal Blandino, who's a semi-regular, if he doesn't come on watching the live streams, he comments on the videos afterward. Why does Oh, it was Brandon Doherty. Why he doesn't like rain, and I will answer that from an earlier experience when I blocked him on Facebook for the first time. Was he made it a point to tell me that he has quite an interesting social life. Apparently, he is very popular with the women, or this is according to him. And when the weather is bad, it interferes with his plans. That's what he told me. Okay, so Sal, all the more power to you. Uh, uh, Hang on, just a second, Joe. I have a surprise. Uh, I think I lost him. Um, uh, Working on a guest. Hold on a second.
On a guest.
Yes.
Who might it be? Maybe it's Dr. Frank Field.
Oh, okay. Oh no, it wasn't. Actually, it was Addison. I just had Addison Green was going to come on. He just messaged, just was sitting in the waiting room on Zoom video, and I was just went to click, and he disappeared. And he just messaged me to tell me that his boss just called, and he has to go on to a station meeting. So unfortunately, we were going to have Addison Green, a meteorologist from Houston TV. I forgot what Houston television station he's at.
KHOU.
KHOU.
Yes.
All right. So yes,
CBS
the CBS affiliate there, I believe. So or the CBS. Was it a CBS O and O? I lost track. They used to. Once upon a time, they were only allowed to own 5 stations. Now they own. They all
I
own
don't
a
know what
whole
the
bunch.
difference is between. I got to look back the fine line difference between an O and O and an affiliate, which there are differences
Well,
there.
the station, the O and O's were owned by CBS Corporation,
Right.
owned those 5 stations, and um, NBC owned their 5, and ABC owned their 5. Then they expanded it to 7, and then they took the limits off completely, which made uh, it made total sense because do you know, Joe, the value of a television station has collapsed over the last 30 years.
Really?
Oh yeah, they can't give them away because nobody watches TV the same. TV is not the way the actual set is to an extent, but even that is not necessarily true. But um, the in terms of the delivery of content, local television stations are not worth very much anymore. What they
I
used to sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, they sell for maybe a handful of millions of dollars these days.
I wonder if what the situation is with radio stations.
Well, pretty much the same because didn't a bunch like Clear Channel and a few of the other companies pretty much bought them all.
Right.
And now, of course, with satellite radio the way it is, and podcasts and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everything else, I don't think you have the audience numbers just don't exist anymore. Certainly, they're about 90%. They're down about 80 to 90% is how far down they are.
My friend Gary Citro, who's a very assiduous amateur astronomer and a proud member of the Amateur Observer Society of New York, points out, I hate to tell Joe that my daughter does nonsense on her channel and she has over 11,000 subscribers. That is in reference to the fact that this past week I finally made it up over 1,000 on YouTube. And isn't that the case, Joe, where the ones who are trying to be erudite and provide information have so much lower in terms of numbers of subscribers. And meanwhile, if you tell silly jokes or, as he just said, does silly stuff on her daughter's channel or whatever, it has so many more people watching. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So let's do some Briller Jeopardy, Joe. You ready? Because this is actually
Talking about, talking about silly nonsense, ladies and gentlemen.
no. This is serious stuff, and this this today, the category is I Love Lucy, and the way it's going to work is, I he gives us a name, and the actress, and we point out what episode it was this person was in. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
All right. Eve Arden.
Well, that was the when they arrived in California at the Brown Derby.
Correct.
And they was Eve Arden. It was more like a cameo. She was just sitting behind them, and
Yes. And
and
this was
Lucy,
before the whole thing with, and they were there, and William Holden was having lunch, and that was the
and what was the
center of it
show that
all.
Eve Arden was famous for?
Our Miss Brooks.
Our Miss Brooks.
Correct.
Right.
Also, Eve Arden, Oscar nomination, supporting actress Oscar nomination for Mildred Pierce, which Joan Crawford won the Oscar for back in the 40s. All right, so Don Loper.
That was the Don Loper. That was the Lucy wanted a Don Loper dress, and Ricky would not give in to that. And I think was that the episode where Lucy and Ethel created their own dresses, and Don Loper stole the idea from them.
No, you're mixing two. That was when they were in Paris,
That was
and they wanted the Jacques Marcel dress.
Okay, and Don
Okay.
Loper, that was the one where she went on a hunger strike until Ricky got her.
No, that was also the Jacques Marcel dress. So Don Loper was, she wanted a designer dress. There was a fashion show, and she would go to pick out the dress to Don Loper's, and she picked out the dress, and the dress cost $500. Okay, And then she decided to try to get Ricky to feel sorry for her by laying out in the sun and getting sunburn. And she wound up falling asleep. Meanwhile, Don Loper and Sheila McCrae was in that episode as well.
Right. Right.
And Don Loper gives tells Lucy that because the dress she picked somebody else had already picked, and would she mind wearing a different dress, and said that she could have the dress that she got for nothing, for free. Okay,
Right. I
so
remember.
that's the Don Loper. Hedda Hopper,
Hedda Hooper.
Hedda Hooper,
Hedda
or Hedda
Hooper.
Hopper.
That
Yes,
was that
that's
was
what
the other,
Ricky called it, Hedda Hooper.
right,
Hooper.
and that's when Ricky they were trying to get Hedda Hopper to notice Ricky, and there was that one scene at the pool
Mm-hmm.
where supposedly Ricky jumps in to save Lucy, and
Right.
it wasn't Hedda Hopper
And
the
they were
whole
looking for her hat, and you'd
and
see
her
like they
hat.
were carrying
And,
flower vases over the wall, so you think it
and,
was
and
her
where's
hat.
Hedda Hopper? And where was Hedda Hopper? She was upstairs in the Ricardo's apartment talking with Lucy's mother.
Right, played by Catherine Card,
Right,
by the way. And Hedda Hopper, the mother of William Hopper, who was Paul Drake on Perry Mason.
right.
All right, now
You never,
Cornell Wilde.
you never told me.
Yes, you
I
know
know.
you didn't ask me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cornell Wilde was the one where she was trying to get him to autograph the grapefruit.
No.
No.
Cornell Wilde was in the hotel above, one floor above Lucy, and she was told Ricky told her that she was to not bother him at all, and she was trying to find sneaky ways of sneaking in to get into into Cornell Wilde's apartment,
Right.
the hotel room.
She got dressed up as Bobby, right? The bell.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he was taking a bath and taking a shower, and he wanted his
I
robe, and
remember. And I remember now the grapefruit was Richard Widmark, right?
the grapefruit was Richard Widmark. That's correct. Barbara Eden.
Well, that was the one where they were in Westport, Connecticut, at the
Diana.
Diane
Oh, but yes.
Buenos Dias Senior.
Bonus Dias Senior. Yes, that was one of Barbara's first television appearances, by the way.
Right. And in an interview many years later, when they asked her about that, she said, "I had to stay away as far as I could from Desi. Desi was a Desi was a maniac. Desi, Desi went after anything
Anything
with."
that moved, apparently. Natalie Schaefer.
Natalie Schaefer, who was Mrs. Howell on Gilligan's Island, and wasn't she played? Oh, what did she play? She played some kind of a not a society woman, but some woman at a store or something.
She played the head of a charm school.
That's right.
And this was in Lucy and Ethel go to charm school.
Right.
And she was perfect for the part. She said, "When one walks, one doesn't walk around like a sack of meal.
Yeah.
One glides."
I'd probably get these a lot quicker if I watched Lucy again. But again, as I mentioned earlier this week, they put her on MeTV at like 6:30 in the morning. It's just too early
I
for me to.
know. Now the
Yeah.
next two, I'm having a tough time recalling. Okay, Jack Albertson.
Jack Albertson, Chico and the Man. What role did he play in I Love Lucy?
I don't. I don't. I'm racking my brain trying to recall that one.
I saw Jack Albertson recently on a Twilight Zone. I think no, it wasn't a Twilight Zone. I think it was a Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and you wouldn't have known it was Jack Albertson until you really took a good hard look. We're so used to seeing him as with Chico and the Man, and also in the Poseidon Adventure. And when he was younger, he was a different type of character actor.
Oh,
I
and
don't.
maybe it was early and it was a small bit role. I don't know. But I'm having a tough time remembering it. Also, Sandra Gould.
I don't remember at all Sandra Gould.
No, I don't either. And well, this one I remember. Aaron Spelling.
Aaron Spelling was in an I Love Lucy.
Yes, Aaron. And you know something? If you don't know it, I would not be shocked because it's a scene that is cut out. He's in two scenes in this particular episode, and the first part of that scene is cut out in the syndicated version. He shows up later on, toward the end of the episode again. So I he's not there long enough to make a difference in that if you only see the second one, but if you see him both times, he is in the episode. One of my personal favorites, and I know it's probably one of yours. He's in the episode of when they're in Bent Fork, Tennessee, with Teensy and Weensy.
Really?
Yes, the missing opening scene in the syndicated version.
Is that the one where? And is this the one where they get lost and they ask somebody how you can get to get away from Bent Fork
Get
and
away from well,
well avoid going through Bent Fork.
Well, that part, usually in the syndicated version, that part is what's cut out. They're stopped at a service station, an old service station, and Aaron Spelling is he's the gas station guy. And
Right.
how to avoid they're asking him how to avoid to get to Bent Fork. He later shows up at the end of the episode, toward the end of the episode, when they do the square dance.
Square dancing.
He's the
Yeah.
fourth in the square dance. But that
Right.
is Aaron Spelling. That was his TV
Wow.
debut as a bit part, and he went on to be a huge television show producer.
Wow. Amazing.
Yes, and and Orson Welles.
Oh, that was he did the magic act with Lucy. He levitates Lucy, correct?
He levitates Lucy. That is correct.
With the brooms.
Yes,
Yeah.
and she wants to do Shakespeare with him.
And she invites her Shakespearean teacher from high school or whatever to come down to watch her.
Played by Ellen Corby,
Ellen Corby, Mrs. Walton,
Mrs.
Grandma Walton.
Grandma Walton.
Yeah.
So, as far as the answers are concerned, um, uh, Jack Albertson. Oh, I didn't recognize. Yeah, but you know why? And here's another thing. This is probably why Jack Albertson, and this might be also in a scene that's cut out. He appears in the episode as the helicopter dispatcher from season 5. So when they're
Really?
in Europe, and she's got to go on the
Right.
helicopter,
Right.
that's Jack Albertson. Didn't realize that. And Sandra
Amazing.
Gould, who played Gladys Kravitz on Bewitched. Now the episode comes back to me. That's in the episode where they buy stock in oil wells, where some oil tycoon
Right.
moves into an apartment, and Lucy overhears a conversation, and they think that they're being swindled.
Right. And
Uh,
also Hayden Rourke,
yes, Hayden
Doc,
Rourke,
Dr.
Dr.
Bellows.
Bellows. He was in an early episode when uh, they were. She thought that they were
Spies.
spies from another. Spies from another country, and
Right.
they weren't. Yeah. So there's been a lot of them
Yep.
over the years. Yeah, Aaron Spelling produced Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat. Acting credits include season 4, Tennessee Bound is the episode. Spelling plays a gas station attendant who tries to help them out by getting them away from Bent Fork, past
Yep.
not going through Best. And by the way, here's another one that you might not know. Janet Waldo.
The voice
Jan-
of Jetson.
Right. She was in an early episode where the titled Young Fans, where Richard Crenna it plays the male and the boy, and she had this crush on Ricky, and Lucy and Ricky had to wind up this guy pretending to be really old people, and that's an
Right.
episode, by the way, that Vivian Vance and William Frawley were not in.
Keep jiggling,
They
Peggy.
keep jiggling. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting that there were a few episodes, or least one or two where Fred and Ethel did not make an appearance.
Yes. Um, uh, William Frawley. I don't know why Vivian Vance wasn't in the episode, but William Frawley was probably shot around the time that the Yankees were in the World Series, and he was a very big New York Yankee fan, and he had it written into his contract that if the Yankees were in the World Series, that he wouldn't be able to work
Right.
during that time frame. So as it turned out, the Yankees were in the World Series, I think, 6 times in 7 years while the show was on the air. So they had to uh, they had to uh, work around his particular schedule. So okay, so guess what, Mr. Rayo? Sorry we weren't able to get Addison Green on, folks, but we sure did try. But he had to go into a meeting. So maybe we'll see if we can get a hold of him tomorrow or Tuesday. In the meantime, we've gone a full hour and 15 minutes today on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So
Yes.
for
We had
us,
a nice crowd too. We had at one point what about 131 or
yes, and
yeah.
for a Sunday in the summertime when the weather is hot and humid and most people want to be out on a beach or on a pool, Joe and I both appreciate that.
I could
Thanks.
stay, I could stay out here all day, Joe. The sea breeze is so wonderful today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Reaver says, does anyone have a problem with editing out scenes from old shows because of the current political climate? Oh, that's a good. Well, I do. I actually do. I don't. And also with respect to certain movies, they were made a certain way, and I think the shows were made in a certain way. I think we're all adult enough. We should be all adult enough to understand the context. And I'm a purist when it comes to movie production and television production, and how because there are lessons to be learned from those movies if they were done in a climate where the politics and the world was a different place. So I think that should be left up to the person. In my opinion, it should just like a book. You should it's your choice to read a book, whether it whatever it is, and it's your choice to watch a movie or a television show,
I
whatever it is.
I didn't even I'm not a big fan or never was really a big fan of Happy Days per se, but Reaver 501 points out that on Happy Days they now are digitally blurring out the Confederate flag in Richie's room. That's amazing to me. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I look. I just again for me, it's about the integrity of what was produced, the artists that produced it, and the people that wrote it, and the people that direct it, and they wanted it to look a certain way. I don't think that we should be setting in and editing stuff based on today's standards because you know what? If we do that 50 years from now, or 25 years from now, or 5 minutes from now, somebody's going to take something that you've created and decide that it's not appropriate in their view, and they're going to take your work and they're going to change it. And I don't. I think that's wrong. I don't think you change people's work.
it's amazing to me that they would do something like that on Happy Days. And meanwhile, domestic violence, which is of course a mainstay of many of the problems that we face in this particular society. If you wanted it, I mean, like, how do you allow Ralph on the honeymooners to continuously say more often than not, you know, Alice, bang,
You're going
zoom,
to the moon.
you're
Yeah.
going to the moon or whatever, allowing that, why haven't they touched that? I don't know.
Well, again, it would be an outrage. Or what about on I Love Lucy when Ricky would spank Lucy on a
That's
couple of
exactly right.
episodes?
That's right.
I
When
mean,
she's on the in the she makes the living room look like a carnival, and she's on like a thing that looks like
right,
a
right,
merry-go-round, and he spins her around real fast, and then when she like gets off like dizzy, grabs her and bang bang. You're right. You're absolutely right.
yeah. Again, it boils down to the creator and whose work it is, and you don't screw around with other people's work. You don't have the. I don't believe you have the right to.
Right.
All right? That's why
Well,
we do.
on that
Well,
happy note,
yes. Okay. Well, that was an interesting question. I didn't anticipate it. But that's our never to be humble opinions. And if you disagree with that, well, what can I tell you? Okay. All right, so everybody have a great rest of your Sunday. Joe and I will be back tomorrow at our regular time at 7 o'clock Eastern time, when we'll still have Marco and Laura, and we'll go from there. And we'll be, of course, looking at the severe weather threats for Tuesday for the Northeast and Northern Mid Atlantic.